Welcome everyone to episode 10 of the Exoskeletons and Wearable Robotics podcast, the podcast where we investigate human augmentation technology, how we can compete in a universe of automation and AI replacement, and how we can redefine aging and independent living. Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Bobby. What a wonderful meeting again, and let's have a nice chat.
I'm looking forward to it. So today we have a very special episode. We are going to be talking about Tom's travels to two conferences that he just came back from last week. So this is a departure from us looking at what's been done in the past, and it's our first episode on what is currently being done and what is going to be done in the future.
Yes. So I was lucky enough to go to two conferences. I went to a national ergonomics conference and we presented on a master class, which I'll talk about. And then I went to an augmented enterprise summit, which was focused on virtual reality and augmented reality. And it's focused on wearable systems. And so that could be a place where exoskeletons could be shown. They were shown in, let's say, 2019 and 2020, less so lately, but it was a fantastic conference.
I can't wait to hear more about it. And before we begin, a special thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. We have our VIP tier, Min Rida Vasquez Torres and Volker Bartenbach, and our corporate tier, Humutech and Oxivo. Thank you so much for your support.
Yes, appreciate the support. There's no way we could do this without the support of the community. And you'll see how the Augmented Enterprise Summit really has a burgeoning, successful community. Okay, so on the National Ergonomics Conference, if I go back to the front, it's one of the longest running ergonomics events. It just happened in Las Vegas in October of 2024, and it will occur again next November 2025. But let me go back and see. I want to go back and look at the program and the tracks. So we had a master class on exoskeletons.
There it is.
Okay, so Bob, I went to the National Ergonomics Conference and we had a master class with four speakers: Marisol Barrero from Vibrance Technologies, Matt Marino from Prime Performance, Sarah Bellini Ross from Evolving Innovation, and myself. And in this class, we wanted to really try to prepare companies to put, a tryout pilot test, put exoskeletons into their company. So as an overview, Marisol really was asking the question, are you ready? Is your company ready for exoskeletons yet? Do you have leadership buy-in? Is your company interested in trying out newer technologies? If something doesn't work the first time, but you might have to trial it a bit, is that okay? Right? Are you a risk averse, type of company, or you're a risk, taking type of company? And so she really set the stage on how to prepare company leadership, prepare people to bring these exciting technologies into your company. She had charts and methods to think about how to bring the exoskeletons into your company. And then Sarah talked second on how to start a pilot. So, and how to prepare and start a pilot in your company. And she's an expert in that area. And they talk about exoskeleton, I guess I would call it integrators, where someone who is not the producer, not your company, but an integrator, where they'll go and they'll help you introduce a pilot, make sure that you've picked the right task, make sure that you have a varied group of people that would want to use the device, make sure that the company employees, the company management, the company staff all have buy-in. And she's done this before. And so she talked about how you would pilot an exoskeleton in your company. And then Matt Marino talked about how to use standards. So, and he looked at the ASTM F48 standards, but how to use standard to best prepare your company to try out exoskeletons. So he had a list of ASTM standards that could be used to help pilot and trial exoskeletons. So, for example, you might want to have a questionnaire on, is this exoskeleton being used, and is it, and are people, are the technicians or workers, what do they find good about the exoskeleton? What do they find needs to be improved to the exoskeleton, or how you could implement that exoskeleton? And there's standards, there's guides and standards. So he pointed out 3 or 4 guides and standards that would help you implement an exoskeleton into your company.
And knowing Matt Marino, I'm assuming that these Committee F48 for ASTM International Standards?
They were. So he specifically focused on ASTM, and he specifically focused on 3 or 4 ASTM standards that were guides that could, how do you manage an exoskeleton at your company? How do you collect data? How do you see if that data is useful? How do you make sure that you're safely implementing an exoskeleton device at your company? So it was, there's 3 or 4 guides and safety standards that he really pointed out that would be useful. And so as a company or a commercial entity, you would go to ASTM, purchase those guides or standards, and that could help you. Or again, you could work with an integrator, and that integrator would use those standards and work with the exoskeleton company, the producer, to then implement exoskeletons at a commercial site and show that they're successful.
Yeah, and I've talked in person with all 4 of the presenters in the past, so I'm sure that this was a great workshop. What was the audience reaction to all this?
Yes. So we spoke for about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we had another 40 to 50 minutes of interactions. And in those interactions, it was nice because people were talking about, how they were using exoskeletons at their companies. People were talking about, what types of exoskeletons were being used. So we talked about some shoulder exoskeletons, and we talked about some lower back exoskeletons in logistics. And so we had some nice conversations back and forth, during that 40 minutes as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for that recap. And this was only 1, 2, or 3 hour block out of the conference.
This was a 2-hour block. And, are you ready for exoskeletons? And let me mention one last thing. So I talked about basically the exo workathlon parkours or methods. And so I focused on 2 methods. One was sack handling. And the reason I talked about that, sack handling or box handling, is that was a logistics task for the lower back. And what I explained there is that you could use one of those studies or parkours, and you could use that as an implementation to test an exoskeleton at your company. And the other reason I wanted to mention that too was that they have data with over 150 people showing that exoskeletons do work. And Schneider's really big on that. His data is being collected by real users, real technicians. It's not just graduate students. It's actually parkours or studies that are developed with commercial entities, and then they're tested with real workers and real technicians. So I talked about bag handling, and the other one I wanted to talk about was welding. So in welding, he had a parkour where you are wearing our augmented reality glasses. So this is going to fit with our next talk. but you're wearing augmented reality glasses. You have to do a weld, wear shoulder exoskeleton, and you weld either in front of you or above your head. And then he did two things. Again, he asked questionnaires about, was the exoskeleton useful? Were you hurting? Did it reduce pain? He had a Borg scale. He had a system usability scale. But more importantly, for welding, he had a quality scale. So he could show that the productivity and the quality of the weld both improved. And so I think that's what I wanted to get across there too, is now people are talking about exoskeletons can help with fatigue, can help with ergonomics, but could also help maybe with quality. And I want to mention that because I think that can get, companies excited in the US and thinking about, this could help improve your product, and it will help with fatigue and ergonomics, and it will help the workers as well. So.
I think these are all topics that I would be very happy to revisit in the future, both the integrator versus the distributor model.
Yes.
In one case, like, well, here's the device, have fun with it, versus let us make sure that you're doing the correct matching. Let's make sure that we help you with educating the end user, that you have all the stakeholders, all your documentation is in place. We've seen how your processes are going to change, how we need to record that, change, document that, figure out maintenance responsibilities, and also end of life of the device and everything else that goes with it. And then other topic is this a safety tool? Our occupational exoskeletons a safety tool, which is a cost avoidance, or is there an increase in quality and productivity to go with it? So definitely, I'm glad that you touched upon all of those subjects, and that's just your segment. It seems like everyone who attended the workshop got their value out of it, and that was only 2 or 3 hours out of the. You were there for a whole day.
I was there for a whole day. It was a 2.5-day conference, and I was there for 1 day.
Well, what were your impressions of the other talks? Like, what was your overall mood at the conference?
Yeah, I will mention this. One of the keynote talks was a bit, not super positive on exoskeletons, and thought that we need more research, more justification, more data to show the efficacy of these devices. So when we went into our presentation, there was, a little bit of a mood of, our exoskeletons just this shiny new tool that don't have the data to prove it, let's say, efficacy. What we tried to do is spend a lot of time talking about that there was success stories where, people give some examples of success stories that I know about, like at Toyota, they saw quite a bit of reduction in workers' compensation costs for a shoulder. They were doing a certain task that was a shoulder task with your arm above your head for a long time, let's say with a heavy tool, and they saw some very nice success stories there. But please, we should have Marisol on a future and I know we will on a future podcast to talk about that. Matt Marino and Sarah as integrators have had a lot of success stories, and I think we should definitely have them on a podcast in the future, because I think the community is changing a bit, right? It used to be smaller producers and they would go out to companies, just kind of one-on-one things. Now we're starting to get distributors, and now we're starting to really get the integrators and things like that. So I think that's important. So I think, we all have to know this as a community, but let me summarize again, that as a community, exoskeletons still don't have a wide adoption, in my opinion. I think they have a wider adoption in Europe, let me say, especially with all the data with the Exo Workathlon. And again, that should be a nice podcast, Bobby, that we need to do in the future to really let Urs talk about his exciting work that he's done. But, that's something to think about as a community. The other thoughts I had was, when I went to the exhibition space, there was one company showing lower back exoskeletons, and there was a distributor there that were showing off different types of shoulder back exoskeletons and a hand.
Did you see a lot of people trying them out?
I did see a lot of people trying out the hand exoskeleton, and at the booth for the back exoskeleton, people were definitely putting it on and trying.
Good. So at least a few people got to try it out.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that this was more geared towards safety specialists. I've never been to one of these
It
national.
was a safety specialist and ergonomics conference. I'm thinking out loud, and I'm not an expert in this area. Remember, I'm a robotics engineer. I usually go to IEEE and ASME. But these, I think these are ergonomics conferences. So there's the Applied Ergonomics Conference that once WearCon collaborated with Applied Ergo in, I guess it was 2022, I think, Bobby. And then this was again an ergonomics conference, the National Ergonomics Conference. I'm thinking, when you're thinking safety, what was coming to my head, Bobby, was there's that National Safety Council conference where there was definitely some more, safety engineers were going to that. And you had, I think, a pretty good showing of exoskeletons there we talked about it in one of the podcasts already with HeroWear, I guess, winning the top spot. And I think number 3 was Ergo Sante, the Hapo project. So that's fabulous. So I think we were seeing here, right, there's these specific WearCon conferences. We will do WearCon Europe, but we're going to partner with A+A, the largest PPE safety conference in the world. There's the National Safety Council. There is these ergonomics conferences. And you know what? I'll say this to the community. If you're a producer, please reach out to us and tell us, places you'd like to be and like to go, and how we can help, to grow this community.
Yeah, at a minimum, we've been updating the events calendar on Exoskeleton Report to try and capture all of the conferences, competitions.
You bet I can go there. I was just going there to find us, and you bet there was a Cybathlon conference, National Ergonomics companies, or anybody who's doing digital twin technology. Schneider was a rec here thinking about how to use exoskeletons to help people get back to work. This was the National Safety Council I was just talking about. And then there's the rehabilitation robotics conferences that I have gone to in the past, the BioRobs and things like that. ASTM had an Exo Games. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, there's more than 80 events that we have captured in the past.
Yes, and this is where we could use people's help with Patreon and things, where Bobby is actively developing the events calendar. And for people that are new to the podcast, we did 4 or 5 podcasts on the exoskeleton catalogs.
That we sure did, to give an overview of the exoskeleton industry and how people are envisioning that it will help humanity moving forward. So that was one day of the conference, and then you jumped on a plane and went
to Augmented Enterprise. And so Augmented Enterprise is a place where maybe exoskeletons and wearable producers could go over to this conference and be part of a wearable technologies conference. The reason I think that this is important is they have the same kind of things that we're thinking about. How do you get people to wear a device? It's a brand new technology. Will people really want to use it? And let me just give an overall statement. It was I went for one day, but it was an exciting conference. And they really have built an industry and shown how that you can create a new technology and get that technology out to the marketplace. They had a very large exhibition space with large companies, Meta, just large companies going there. And then the speakers were outstanding. So I think I was going to talk a little bit about, some of the agenda that I saw on the second day. So I was just there for the second day. So let me scroll down for a second and just talk a little bit about what I saw. So on the second day, to give an example, Mark Sage is the executive director of a not-for-profit organization for augmented reality for Enterprise Alliance. They really had a very nice structure and a team that was extremely excited about how to create and to exactly this. The goal is to develop a robust and active ecosystem for augmented reality and virtual reality. And they really did a nice job. I mean, actually, if I have time, just give me a second, Bobby. I could, let's see, Area Alliance VR. And they have exactly some of the things that, we've been talking about as a community. They have committees on research, human factors, safety, marketing, requirements, and security and research. It was just, they've really built an exciting, Augmented Enterprise was an exciting conference, and the speakers were just really well done.
Well, before you leave that, can you
Sure.
can you explain in a few words what is the idea for this enterprise alliance to add value? Because the augmented and virtual reality space has had billions with a capital B in investment and funding. It's safe to say that it's a 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 10,000 ratio of investment in wearable robotics and exoskeletons versus virtual reality and augmented reality. So how do they envision, as a not-for-profit organization, to add value to the development of that technology?
So how they are doing it, they envision by having the end users and producers of devices work together in committees to think about, human factors and safety and marketing and, set requirements, for these devices. So this device will talk with this computer and this camera, and right. So you can imagine, like, to give an example that I was impressed with, like, let's say you have a worker and they need to make sure that this high tech, I don't know, I'm going to make up something but they talked about this. They like a high tech engine in a jet, right? So the worker puts on the glasses and it will document that they are putting the bolts back in the right pattern. Then you could clip on a heat device to sense a heat map, and you could tell if maybe there's some liquid leaking or there's a crack somewhere or something. Or what they said was you want to actually add on artificial intelligence. So the person speaks and says, hey, I took this engine apart. I found this oil leak. This wasn't right. So I fixed this, I fixed that, I did this. And then it automatically generates the report for the worker. And so the worker can have the safety report written for you. So
I was just on a plane. I was just on a plane a few weeks ago, and they had to do some maintenance on the engine, and then the pilot announced, okay, the maintenance is done, but now we need 20 minutes for them to write the report before we can take off.
Exactly. But what they're doing now is they're really thinking about, I put on these augmented reality systems and I have to have this camera talk to this system, and I have to add in some artificial intelligence because I could do speech recognition now, and I'm going to use ChatGPT to write the summary of the report, and then I'm done. And I thought, oh man, that's a really good idea.
So then this nonprofit,
These high-end technicians successful, right? And they're going to do what they do best, fix something, and then the report gets written for them. I mean, it was an exciting conference. I'm just giving one example. I've got 2 or 3 more examples to share with people. But I guess what I'm getting at is this is like when you have a large end user base with a large amount of producers all coming to a shared conference and working on some shared goals with an alliance, you can get a lot done. And it was an impressive, again, I'm saying it again, it was an impressive conference.
Definitely sounds interesting, and maybe something that we can discuss further.
Right.
What lessons we can learn from them. And obviously, of course, they have a lot more money and finances to work with in that industry field. Which other presentations caught your eye?
I'll talk about maybe a couple more and then we'll stop. One company, RealWear, was talking about their success stories of augmented reality and systems, and that was a nice presentation. But I wanted to go into what I thought was a really well done conversation by Abbott. I mean, this was a very nice conversation. So he's saying, okay, let's say you're going to build the next technology project, and it could be the next exoskeleton. So I want to build the next passive exoskeleton, or my company might build the next quasi-active exoskeleton or something like that. And he said, I want to study 2 pilots and find out why one is a success and one's not. So one pilot basically was about how could you get virtual reality into the surgical room. And another pilot was about, and I'm going to talk most about this, was how can you help people give more blood, right? Literally, how do you convince people to give blood? And it could be a very nervous, and a little bit painful, I've given blood before process. But so what they said is, okay, we're going to build, Abbott tests all, like, I don't know, I think they said 60, 70% of the blood supply. But the problem is we don't have enough blood supply. So how can we convince this was the product. How can we convince Gen Z and millennials to give blood? So you're going to put on this virtual reality headset and you're going to build a virtual garden to create life as you're giving blood to give life. But it was just, so you can click on these sites, like read more, and then the presentation slides are right there. And I think I went down, so you can slide down. I already had this pulled up already. But he talked about the success factors that really matter. And he said, your company has to have clarity. How focused am I at my ultimate purpose? How precisely have I defined the audience? What does the audience really want to require? Is my scope tight enough? And then leadership. Do I really have buy-in and leadership at my company? What is the appetite for risk and willingness to do something new? And that's what Marisol talked about, right? On exoskeletons. Is there leadership that will drive this forward? And what he's saying is you can't have one leader. You have to have multiple leaders in the company. Like, let's say you're going to bring an exoskeleton into a car manufacturing plant. You have to have multiple leaders that want to see this succeed. It's got to be, I don't know, thinking out loud, it's got to be the safety personnel, the ergonomics personnel, also get buy-in from the finance people that this could help with quality. This could help with less days off of work, but really have a team of leaders. And then he talked about champions. And he was one of the most passionate speakers I've seen in a long time. And he talked about you really have to have a champion. And the champions you have to have champions along the way. You have to have champions at the company to build, at Abbott, but then you have to have champions with the nurses that are going to actually implement this wearable technology. And then you have to have champions. You have to actually, and he talked about this, you have to actually have end users that talk about it and say, hey, this really worked. This is great. like you need that buzz on whatever it is, social media, or, and you have to have end users that are champions. Like what he was talking about, you have to have champions along the way. And I don't, that's what I've talked about with you, Bobby, where we have to have success stories, where producers have success stories, but companies that are using the device have success stories, and end users that are wearing it. And actually, that reminds me, Bobby, once we had that, when Toyota gave a virtual keynote talk, and I think let's call it 2021, Bobby, maybe at WearCon, we had that. We had ergonomics people that really saw it as a success. We had a VP of Toyota, giving a 1 hour talk about the success of exoskeletons. But in that presentation, he had end users saying, this is a great device. And so that's important. And then lastly, you have to have KPIs to demonstrate success. Because he said, we are for-profit companies, and we're going to have KPIs to measure success. And so it was a well done, really well done presentation. And after the presentation, which was kind of interesting, as soon as the presentation ended, they had about 20 or 30 people you could escort you over, and you could give blood, right there, in the exhibition. So it was a nice talk. It was really well done.
So
I know I was a little bit passionate there, Bobby, but I was impressed. I don't know, any thoughts?
Well, I've seen absolutely wonderful reports on success stories that are very easy to digest with pictures and videos. I remember one, and I think I tried to highlight it, was on pipe installation. They had the inspectors come into the building, put on augmented reality, and be able to see virtually where all the pipes, where all the cables, where all the ducting, all the work was done through the walls as they're walking the corridors, and how they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing it that way versus doing it the old-fashioned ways of looking at 2D diagrams. So I'm assuming that you saw success stories like that, but this is how it would have been done before without this technology, how much it would have cost. And then this is a success story of how we API'd it, how we did the key performance indicators to show that we are doing it faster, making it safer, and saving money. Now, I remember going to this conference websites, and one of the things that they talked about is that they also talk about failures and stumbles, that it's a way for end users to connect with the producers. For the one day that you were there, did you catch any of that?
I didn't catch any of that just for the day that I was there, but but it was a very vibrant conference, and the exhibition floor was very large, and they had a lot of interactions, like the lunch and was on the exhibition floor, and they had breaks in the exhibition floor to go there. So it was well done. And so again, why I'm talking about this is there's a thought that maybe we could convince exoskeleton producers, to come to this conference maybe next year. So it's a thought. And
yeah, I can absolutely see where there is a connection, especially for haptic feedback devices, gamification. One of the WearCon conferences, there was even a gentleman with a prototype with a full body exoskeleton, if I remember correctly, for virtual reality and gaming. As of right now, with the majority of haptic feedback devices for AR, VR, your eyes are seeing that you're grasping a project, let's say, and then they focus on a tactile sensation. It could be like there was one I tried with air pockets, where air pockets would inflate against your fingers, so you feel as if now something is compressing against your skin as you're grasping the virtual object. But you can also have a quasi-passive exoskeleton that engages brakes on your fingers and prevents your fingers from folding into the virtual space of that object. I think there's a lot of potential for exoskeletons where you can feel forces that are indicative as to what is happening in the virtual reality. And you could also say that now for many years on the medical and physical rehabilitation side, we have seen the gamification and introduction of virtual reality, augmented reality to keep people occupied as they're doing the same repetitive, tedious tasks to retrain their muscles and their body to gain that, to regain some of their functional independence. So just off of the top of my mind, I can see quite a few overlaps and the potential for transitioning and exchanging ideas. And at a minimum, what you're saying is like, well, this is how they approach telling their success stories. This is how they approach predictive indicators on if this is going to be a successful implementation, and how they share some of the same difficulties where it's still a wearable device that still causes heat, sweat, or tension, discomfort. It's something new in your body and that the users have to get used to it. So I'm really glad that you went there and you're taking the time to share with the community your experiences, because I'm confident that this is not something that your average exoskeleton company has time to even look into.
Right. Right. And also, I think the bigger thing I'd like to kind of get out too is that they, and here's where I'm going to go next, is they are bringing multiple technologies together to make sure that their wearable system is successful. So, like, to give you an example, I went to some talks on digital twin technology. So it wasn't just, wearable AR and VR, but people were thinking about how can you support, this digital twin technology. And then that led me to, I'm seeing if I can find it, but it led me to a case study by Trek. And I just wanted to bring that one up just because it was a really, really impressive talk about, again, where you could go with technology. And so Trek was saying, I want to basically build a digital twin of a bicycle. And so we, as producers and designers of exoskeletons, how could you, build a digital twin, but more than that, like digital marketing of your device. So Trek basically said, okay, we're going to build a digital twin of our bikes. We're going to get all of our customers and producers to give us designs. So, like, right, we don't make the chain, but we'll get the exact CAD drawings of the chain, or we don't make the derailleur, but we'll get the CAD drawings of that derailleur. And we will basically design bikes in virtual reality. So what you can do is you can go on their website now and design a bike, and then you can see it. But what they're doing is that's allowing them to create a story, to create a marketing story, to create a pitch where you can design the entire bike in virtual reality. Then someone can wear virtual reality glasses and see the bike from all angles and want to purchase it. So you literally do the impossible with digital, and all of these images are digital images. So they were saying, can you create quality that's as good as a real paint job and as good as a real photography? I mean, it was just really, really well done, where you've got to lay the bricks. And so there, all of this engineering design work is all in a digital twin technology. And you pick out your bike. You say, I want this derailleur, I want this paint job, I want this, I want that. And you can assemble the bike. You can do all of your mesh and your data analysis. So you can do all of your engineering in digital. and then you can, design the bike. It was a really nice talk again, too, where literally, this I think would be the state of the art where how do you design a bike from scratch digitally, have a digital twin, digital paint job, and then when you're done with that, you put that in, on your website, and someone can literally pick out, design the bike, design the colors, and get a one of a kind bike sent to their house.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was impressive.
And to bring it all together, we are seeing digital twin technology in manufacturing, where you will take a task. I think the easiest one to envision is if you do like a car manufacturing plant, you have a 3-minute task where you have to put bolts underneath the chassis. We've seen digitization of that, where everything is replicated in a computer-aided design software from the person picking up the bolts from the station, walking to underneath the car chassis, raising up their arms, putting in each individual segment, and then you can do this with and without an exoskeleton in order to be able to do a virtual evaluation and assessment of the situation. And all of the ones that we have seen are pretty corny looking. You will not be winning any marketing competitions with them. And I think another place where I've seen similar technology was to get more buy-in for people to use prosthetics by being able to custom design the paint job decorations and shape to get them to be more likely to actually to go out and wear that in public and have people see them.
Yes. And I think what we're getting at here is, and I think we talked about this in a previous podcast, is this is something that someone has to wear, right? And when they put it on, it's got to have some cool factor, and it's got to feel good, and then it's got to help, right? But I think we had this conversation once before, Bobby, where I said I was in the shoe business for 5 years, and people will look at the shoes on a on a state on at the store, but no one will put on the shoe unless they like the look of it first, right? They'll say, no, no, no. But if they like the look of it, then they'll put the shoe on. And I think we have to think about that a little bit, right? We are in the wearable business. And I think Trek was there saying, look, you got to get that factor. Like, this is, my custom one of a kind bike, and I've designed it. And then then I'm going to buy it, and it's, it's exciting, right? And so I think we need some of that excitement. And I guess maybe I'll leave it there, which was the Augmented Summit sorry if I missed the Augmented Enterprise Summit Conference. It was an exciting conference. You could see that the technology was being used. Yes, they probably had some, troughs of despair a little bit, and then, coming back, but I could easily see, augmented reality. Like, I put the headset on, and it helps me with my job, helps me to write my reports. I put the headset on, and I get to see my one of a kind carbon fiber next generation bicycle, and then I'm going to purchase that. And it was an exciting conference. It was well done.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you were able to go to both of them and that you took the time to sit and give us a recap, because not all of us could go. And clearly you have learned a lot and seen a lot. And now I hope that our listeners have as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey.
You're welcome, Bobby. And I hope the listeners get out that the augmented reality and virtual reality is exciting. And I want to make sure that exoskeletons are exciting. And I think you, Bobby, are part of that journey. And people need to understand that we're still on the road, in that journey of making exoskeletons exciting, making exoskeletons people want to wear it. It's got to feel good, and then it's got to help. It's got to help with long-term ergonomics. It's got to help with fatigue, and it's got to help with, let's say, quality and production. But
And we tell those customer success stories.
we do. Let's end on that. I think that, and I've said this multiple times, please reach out to us and, reach out to us with, like a super fun success story. And maybe we can get it out there on the wearablerobotics.com, Exoskeleton report, because the VR AR, I think, is on the way up again, at least where I was sitting and standing, and they have some success stories where I think it makes sense, and we need to really, and I think we have that in exoskeletons. We've shoulder exoskeletons and lower back exoskeletons, but we need more of that. And I think what I'm thinking out in my head is that I saw that at WearCon Europe at the Exo Park. They had some nice leadership at that Augmented Enterprise Summit, and people that were really trying to grow the ecosystem. And let's try to do that more in the coming months.
Yep, I would love to. And on that note, thank you all for listening. We are out of time. Please check out both the Wearable Robotics Association website and the Exoskeleton report, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, please support Exoskeleton Report on Patreon. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Yay! You had so much to say.
Was that good, or I don't?
It was excellent.